My name is Carole and I am 42 years old. I am an engineer at a technology company in Bordeaux, a beautiful city with its sunny quays and historic buildings. My husband Philippe is a respected 45-year-old surgeon. We have a beautiful house and from the outside, our life seems perfect. However, as with many things in life, appearances can be deceiving. It all started so innocently. At work, I collaborate with various colleagues on complex projects. That's how I met David. David is a brilliant and charismatic 35-year-old engineer with a smile that could melt anyone. We quickly found common ground, sharing innovative ideas and discussing the technical challenges we had to overcome. Our exchanges were purely professional, but there was something more, a spark that I hadn't felt in a long time. Lunches with David became a habit. Initially, it was just to discuss work, exchange ideas, and find solutions. We met in small bistros around the company, enjoying daily specials while discussing our projects. Gradually, our conversations shifted to more personal subjects. We talked about our lives, our passions, our dreams. David had a listening ability that made me feel heard and understood in a way I hadn't felt for years with Philippe. One day, after a particularly stressful meeting, David suggested we grab a drink after work to unwind. I accepted, thinking it would be a pleasant way to end the day. We went to a cozy bar with a dim ambience and soft background music. The glasses of wine kept coming, and with them, our confidences grew deeper and deeper. I told him about my frustrations, my fears, my marriage with Philippe which, though solid in appearance, lacked the spark I found with David. From that moment on, the messages between David and me took a different turn. They became more personal, more intimate. We exchanged texts late into the night, talking about everything and nothing, but mostly about us. Every vibration of my phone made my heart beat faster. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I couldn't stop. There was something exciting, almost addictive about this budding relationship. Secret meetings began. We met in discreet cafes, far from prying eyes. Each meeting was a mix of excitement and guilt. I felt alive in a way I hadn't felt in years, but at the same time, I knew I was betraying Philippe. David and I spent hours talking, laughing, and discovering each other. There was a chemistry between us that I couldn't ignore. One afternoon, while Philippe was away at a medical conference, David and I decided to meet in a small hotel outside the city. It was a charming place with rustic decorated rooms and a breathtaking view of Bordeaux's vineyards. We spent the afternoon together, forgetting the outside world, lost in our bubble of passion. It was magical and intoxicating, but also terribly frightening. I knew I was crossing a line, but I couldn't turn back. When we entered the room, the atmosphere was already charged with tension. The room was welcoming, with burgundy velvet curtains and soft lighting that created an intimate ambience. We sat on the bed, our hearts beating in unison. David gently took my hand, the warmth of his touch making me shiver. He looked me in the eyes, and at that moment, all hesitation vanished. We started kissing timidly at first, then more passionately. His lips were soft, and each kiss made a wave of desire rise in me. He gently laid me down on the bed, and we let our hands explore each other's bodies, discovering new and exciting sensations. It was as if we were alone in the world, wrapped in our bubble of passion. Our clothes quickly disappeared, replaced by naked skin burning with desire. Hours passed without us realizing it, each moment together being a rediscovery of ourselves and our sexuality. The passion I felt with David was of an intensity one had never known before, a connection both physical and emotional. After these moments of passion, we lay side by side, exhausted but happy. We talked about our lives, our dreams, our fears. There was a shared vulnerability that further strengthened our bond. David made me feel alive, desired, and that gave me a strength I didn't know I had. The following weeks were a whirlwind of contradictory emotions. Each moment spent with David was a stolen, precious moment but also tinged with guilt. I tried to keep up appearances at home, to pretend everything was fine with Philippe. But he wasn't fooled. He felt something had changed, that I was drifting away from him. Our conversations had become superficial, our moments of intimacy rare and forced. Then came the day when everything changed. Suspicious and worried, Philippe decided to follow me. That day, David and I had planned to meet at our usual hotel. We were in the room, laughing and enjoying our moment when the door suddenly opened. Philippe stood there, his face contorted with pain and anger. My heart stopped. It was as if the world was collapsing around me. There were no screams, no violent confrontation. Philippe just looked at me with infinite sadness in his eyes before turning on his heels and leaving. I felt petrified, unable to move or speak. David was also in shock. We knew our story had just ended in the most brutal way possible. Back home, Philippe and I had a long and painful conversation. I confessed everything to him, from our first messages to our last meeting. He listened in silence, his face closed off. When I finished, he took a deep breath and told me he couldn't go on like this. He needed time to think, to rebuild himself. He loved me, but the betrayal was too great to be forgotten or quickly forgiven. Philippe decided to leave the house for a few weeks to clear his mind. As for me, I felt empty and lost. I had risked everything for a fleeting passion and lost everything. The following days were a nightmare. The house, so full of happy memories, now seemed cold and hostile. I felt guilty and alone. Gradually, I began to realize the extent of my betrayal. I had hurt the man I loved, destroyed our life together for an affair that, though exciting, had no solid foundation. I tried to contact Philippe, to explain to him, to ask for forgiveness. But he needed time, and I had to respect that. The following months were a process of rebuilding. Philippe and I decided to go to couples therapy to try to understand what had brought us here. It was a long and difficult path, filled with tears and questioning. We had to relearn how to communicate, to trust each other. Today, Philippe and I are no longer together. We decided to separate, but in a respectful and friendly manner. We understood that our relationship had changed irreversibly. Philippe has moved on with his life, and I am trying to find a new balance. I carry with me the painful but valuable lessons about love, fidelity, and the choices we make. I remember the first weeks after the separation as a dense fog. Each day seemed endless, each night filled with troubling dreams and waking up with a start. The house, once a warm refuge, had become a cold prison. Every room reminded me of happy memories now tinged with sadness. I had trouble eating, sleeping, and concentrating at work. My colleagues noticed my change, but I kept the details of what had happened to myself. David and I also stopped all contact. Although our relationship had been intense, the reality of what we had done weighed heavily on both of us. He was also aware of the impact of our actions on Philippe and the destruction of my marriage. We mutually decided to distance ourselves from each other to try to regain some normalcy in our respective lives. The first months were a constant challenge. I felt like I was walking through thick fog, each day bringing its share of regrets and pains. Philippe had decided to stay out of the house for a while, and I found myself alone, surrounded by memories of our life together. The house had become a silent museum of what had been and what would no longer be. To try to regain balance, I threw myself headlong into my work. I accepted every possible project, working late into the night and even on weekends. My colleagues noticed my change in behavior, but I remained vague about the reasons. Only my direct superior was aware of my personal situation and supported me as much as possible, respecting my privacy. Therapy became a pillar of my reconstruction. I started seeing a therapist specializing in couple relationships and emotional trauma management. Initially, I was reluctant to open my heart and talk about my deepest feelings, but gradually, I realized the importance of this process. My therapist helped me understand the underlying reasons for my infidelity, confront my fears and insecurities, and find ways to forgive myself. Philippe and I also decided to undergo couples therapy. The sessions were difficult, filled with tears, anger, and sometimes heavy silences. But they were necessary. We revisited our past, analyzed our mistakes, and tried to understand how we had ended up here. We worked on communication, trust, and forgiveness. It was a long and arduous path, but essential for moving forward. During this period, I also learned to rediscover who I was as an individual. I resumed activities I had put aside for years. I started painting again, a passion I had abandoned long ago. I also joined a book club where I met wonderful people who helped broaden my horizons and find friendly support. Little by little, Philippe and I began to rebuild our relationship, not as a married couple but as two people who still respected and deeply cared for each other. We decided to divorce amicably and respectfully. We wanted this separation to be a smooth transition, without bitterness for both of us. Philippe found an apartment in the city, and we divided our belongings fairly. We also took care to maintain good communication, especially regarding the divorce formalities and managing our house. The proceedings went smoothly, and we eventually signed the divorce papers, closing an important chapter in our lives. Over time, Philippe moved on with his life. He met someone else, a fellow doctor with whom he shares many common interests. I am happy for him because I know he deserves to be happy and loved. As for me, I continued to focus on my own healing and personal development. One day, while walking along the Bordeaux quays, I ran into David. It was a chance meeting, and we exchanged a few cordial words. He told me that he, too, had made progress in his life, that he had met someone and felt at peace. Our conversation was brief, but it brought me a certain closure. I realized that despite the pain and mistakes of the past, we had both found a path to healing. Today, I live alone in a small house near the vineyards. I have rediscovered the joy of solitude and the importance of introspection. My work still excites me, and I have found a balance between my professional and personal life. I continue to paint, read, and spend time with my friends. This story is a testament to the fragility of human relationships and the consequences of our actions. It is also a reminder that despite mistakes and trials, it is always possible to get up and rebuild one's life. Betrayal and pain are part of life, but they are not the end. They can be the beginning of a new chapter full of growth and discoveries. I have learned that love, fidelity, and the choices we make are complex and often difficult to navigate. But I have also learned that forgiveness, both towards others and oneself, is essential for moving forward. I do not regret what I have experienced because each experience has brought me valuable lessons and helped me become the person I am today. With time, patience, and self-work, it is possible to find peace and rebuild after a period of turmoil. My life may not be perfect, but it is authentic, and for that, I am grateful.